Okay, girls, so today we're going to be doing our chapter 12.3 on primary and secondary data. Okay, so first let's talk about the difference between quantitative and qualitative data. So quantitative data is data that is expressed a certain quantity. It's usually an amount or a range. Usually, there are measurement units associated with the data. For example, meters in the case that we were measuring the height of a person. Okay, so every time that we're talking about quantitative data, we're thinking about quantity, amount, or a range. Okay, so please, this is not highlighted, but I want you to please write this down. Before I continue, let me say something. um, the last lesson and this one has a lot of things to write down. So you don't have to write everything. But complete notes means that if you're talking about quantitative data, you have it can be a shorter definition of this. You can even write quantity data and just have quantity, amount, or range, and that it usually have units. And that's what you have. It doesn't mean that you have to write the whole sentence. Okay, girls? Now, qualitative data, I struggle with these two words, is defined as the data that approximates or and characterizes. So basically, as data that help us understand or describe an event. Okay, this type of data is non-numerical. Okay, so it's non-numerical and it helps us to, I like this word, characterize, to explain, to give characteristics about something. Okay, so that's what quality data is used for. In statistics, we are going to be talking mainly about quantitative data because qualitative data, we can't analyze it as data. So it gives us information. So let's talk about a definition. So for example, let's say that I want to understand how students study for a test. So if I want to have interviews and I want to sit with each one of you and talk about your routines and how do you do it, and it's a conversation, then this is going to give me more information to understand how it works. But I can sit down and create a frequency table with that information. Agree? So usually, what we analyze with the statistics is based on quantitative data. So we are going to be focusing on this type of data, but it's important that you know, and I'm sure that you have been talking about qualitative data in other subjects. But in here in math, we're going to be focusing on quantitative data. Okay, so primary data. What is primary data? So primary data reflects to the data that you collect yourself. So the data that you have created yourself, not data that you are reading from someone else that someone else has collected, but the one that you have collected yourself. Okay, so this means that you have the ownership of the data and that no one else can use that data until you publish it or you release it. Okay, and publish it can be that you publish it in a magazine, and it can also be that you can make it available for other people to use. Okay, methods of collecting primary data is observation, measurement, surveys, experiment, and simulation, and we're going to see each one of those methods next. So let's start with observation. So this involves recording the behavioral patterns of people, objects, and events in a systematic manner. So I wrote that because it's not only that I'm going to observe what is happening, but I have to make sure that I'm recording that information with certain system that I have thought in advance that I'm going to be using. I'm going to do an example about this later on, so I'm not going to go into much detail now. So this observation can be like a disguised observation. So when the observants or the people that are the respondents doesn't know that they're being observed, or undisguised when the other person is aware that it is being observed. So this can happen, for example, in a natural environment, for example, in a food hall. So if you are, let's say, in the food hall of Chadston and you're observing where people go to have lunch, and you're standing there observing, people might not be aware that they're being observed and you're taking notes. So that will be disguised observation in a natural environment. But let's say that you're going to have a food tasting because we want to know which one is your favorite ice cream. So then let's say that I'm observing you girls, so I'm giving you different flavors of ice cream and I'm observing your reactions to different flavors. So in that way, it's undisguised and it's in a contrived environment. Mechanical devices as video cameras and closed circuit television can also be used to gather this type of data. Okay, measurement involves using measuring device to collect data. So usually it's in an experiment. For example, I can measure the height of all of you or the mass of all newborn babies can be collected and that reflects to measurement. Okay, surveys. We already talked about surveys in the previous, so I'm not going to go into much detail of what a survey is, but I want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using surveys through an email. So some of the advantages are that can cover a large number of people or organizations, so you can cover a lot of people at the same time. It can be wide geographic. You're not limited to do it only in one country. You can do it worldwide. It avoids embarrassment on the part of the respondent because you're usually answering to a computer. So if they are asking a personal question, something that they're not going to be very comfortable disclosing face to face, a survey, an online survey is much easier to do that. There is no interviewer bias because a computer is doing it. It's basically on the questions. If the questions are designed very well, then there is not going to be any bias. The respondent has time to consider the responses. It's relative cheap. And what are some of the disadvantages? The questions have to be relative simple. So if you're going to ask someone a complex question that is not easy to understand, people can get confused and can get wrong answers. At the same time, if you're asking a question in a survey that people have to write a lot, they probably won't want to do that. So they have to be quite simple and easy to answer. The response rate is often quite low because the people don't feel that they have to do it. They don't feel as responsible or as obliged to say yes because it's a computer. So basically, a lot of people don't answer the surveys. The reliability of the answers is questionable. So let's say that I want to serve you girls, about how are you finding this online learning, but I send a survey and then one of your siblings answers the survey for you. And then I don't know, from my endpoint, I'm thinking that you girls did it. So I think that the data is reliable, but maybe I'm getting answers that I didn't expect or they're very weird. No control over who actually completes the questionnaire and problems with incomplete questionnaires. Okay, let's stop there for a minute.